So that's already going. Let me make this a bit bigger on the screen too, so we can see a little bit better there. All right. So this is the September 18th, 2025 Crossplane community meeting. Let me drop a link in the Zoom chat right now again. So if folks aren't already in the agenda document, you can get in there and join in. And as always, people are very welcome to add any particular topics or questions or things that they want to cover. So that everybody's getting what they want out of this meeting here. So feel free to add anything to the agenda you want. All right, so let's talk about releases, upcoming releases. We had a community meeting since the V2.0 release, so we've already talked about that. So let's kind of talk about what may be next. I think that I don't know the timeline exactly yet, but I think we should be doing a 2.0.3 patch release sometime soon. There are already some fixes that have been merged or backported into the release 2.0 branch. One of them I think is quite important for fixing real-time compositions using namespace composite resources, which is obviously a marquee feature of the V2 release. So I think that we're going to need to do a patch release for that one on its own, I would say. But then we also do have a few more outstanding backport PRs to the release 2.0 branch that are still open. So I think we should converge on those and then wrap that up into a 2.0.3 patch release. Yeah, so I don't know the timeline exactly on that one, but that should be sometime soon. So we're getting those fixes out and helping drive the quality of the 2.0 branch, basically. Is there anything that folks already know of that would be a backport candidate that's not included in these links here? Certainly open to considering more backports if they're necessary. All right. All right. So then let's talk about the next minor release, which would be 2.1. So as always, we do quarterly releases for the Crossplane project. So the last, the 2.0 major release was in early August. That means that 2.1 will be early November. And that also sets us up for the release right before KubeCon Atlanta, which is fairly fortuitous timing, I would say. So let's talk about some of the themes of the 2.1 release. I think really like honestly, the best way to describe it is core reliability. There's a number of things that we can improve and harden to make what we did with the 2.0 release to be further polished, further ready for production usage, all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where most of our time is, where we want to be able to spend on for important cycles, is making everything more reliable. The very first thing I can think of when it comes to that is real-time compositions and the very, very rapid reconciliation loops they can get into, which uses a lot of resources, slows down the cluster, slows down the ability for other resources to be reconciled. So we kind of need a more robust solution for that. So folks have been following along at home. Nick came up with a design for kind of a circuit breaker design for compositions or composite resources that are being reconciled way, way, way too fast and using up all the resources in the cluster. So essentially, because maybe a little bit more background here is that with real-time compositions, there is a class of scenarios that you can't really entirely avoid from happening, right? Where you've got the composition that says to put one of the composed resources at a particular value, and then if the provider that owns that resource, basically conflicts with that value and changes it to another value. With real-time compositions, you've got, and hey, Nick, I'm talking about real-time compositions here and the work you're doing with the circuit breaker. So let me know if I'm butchering it or anything like that, but I'll keep talking. So if you have the scenario there where, the composite reconciler and the provider reconciler are essentially fighting over a field, and you've got these real-time watches that are responding to changes, one gets changed, they conflict, the other one notices it puts it back, and they basically just go really fast and fight over it like that. So Nick's design here is like, kind of a circuit breaker concept of, if we see that reconciliations for a particular composite resource are happening too fast, then we'll break the circuit and prevent further reconciliations happening at that rate for a while, let it cool down, and give it some time to not overwhelm the system, and then kind of get back into a healthier reconciliation scenario after that. I think we've Nick, is there anything much left on this PR? We kind of talked about it a bunch. We had CodeRabbit hop in there as well. There's not too much left, right? This is getting to a pretty good state.
Yeah, I think it's ready to go. If I recall correctly, there was like one, maybe two threads that you and Hassan had commented on that I would value you responding on. One was about like the terminology, and whether
Oh, right. Yeah, open close type of thing.
confusing to end users. I Hassan commented something else as well, but I don't think that was an open thread. I think it was just a yep, that's how it's going to be kind of situation. I forget what it was.
Awesome. Cool. Yep. So then yeah, hopefully we'll be able to wrap that up. We were considering throughout the design and the review of this here, we're considering a backport of this, but that's I don't think we've concluded on that one yet, because that certainly would have some element of risk to it as well, because it's not a simple bug fix here, right? This is kind of some structural stuff around the composition engine and reconciliation to make this happen. So we may want to let it bake for a little bit instead of just trying to throw it into patch releases in previous versions first. But I don't think we've made a full decision on that. Nick, are you leaning one way or another after kind of sitting on this for a bit during the implementation?
I hadn't, I've kind of forgotten about it and hadn't really thought about it very much. So, I mean, so I don't lean one way or the other. The trade-off, right, is that, as you say, if we backport it now, it's pretty high risk. Well, actually, I don't know if it's that high risk, but it is a non-trivial amount of code, let's say. If we don't backport it, I mean, we're already seeing multiple people just turning off real-time compositions, and that'll keep happening. So I would rather not train people that they just can't trust real-time compositions. So to that
Yeah.
extent, I would prefer to have it fixed before v2.1.
Yeah, and then now remembering kind of like the way the implementation was done here, it doesn't feel as invasive as I thought it might to begin with. It's like the token bucket concept there is a nice abstraction and it's not like we did complete surgery on the reconcilers, flow and logic and stuff like that. So it might not be as high a risk as I had previously thought before I saw the implementation.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we'll try to follow up on that one though, to get that merged, because I feel this is a key improvement and investment for the 2.1 milestone, regardless of whether it ends up being backport or not. It is a key investment in terms of core reliability.
Yeah, let me add for later on. Let me add something else to get community feedback on that's related to this time.
Like to the agenda doc, you mean, Nick, or?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, feel free to. Yeah, drop it in the doc. We'll get there when we get there. Likewise, there's also some reliability that we can improve in terms of the package manager. I don't know the full extent of the investments we'll be able to make here, but there's a number of scenarios where folks run into upgrade something, downgrade something, change package source, whatever it may be, and end up with the certain packages stuck and unhealthy because of transferring owner references on a CRD from one revision of a package to the next revision. There's some unreliability in that causes some negative experiences with long-term maintenance of your all's control planes. So I think that's a nice area to be investing in as well. We also wanted to pick some of the APIs, the Crossplane APIs here. We track all of those in this feature lifecycle project here. So, all the alpha APIs are in here, the ones that we want to mature to beta, all the ones that are in beta that we want to mature to GA. So, choosing a couple of those for this release and maturing them as well is important. I'd probably say most of these have work to do with them. Most of these are not just, bump the served version to, the next one, and update the CRDs, etc. Most of them have some tracking issues associated with them in terms of enhancing and improving the reliability of these APIs. So, that would be part of the investment that we would need to make in order to fully mature these. But this is pretty much, I think we got everything tracked here. The full set of APIs there that we're considering maturing. So if folks, put in a vote for APIs that they think are really important that they want to see continue to be matured, then that definitely helps kind of make those decisions. And then the last part here is that, as always, and even more so going into the future, contributions from the community are super, super important. And, we need to spend time on reviewing, stewarding those and helping those out. I don't know if I haven't looked at the data yet, but I feel like since the V2 release around that timeframe, we've had more new contributors showing up and contributing like non-trivial, useful stuff as well. So it's been really nice to see the community continuing to expand in terms of contributors. And it is definitely in the best interest of the project to be giving everybody a good experience with that as well. So that's something that, you can always do better at. And so making more investments in, contributor strategy and stewarding enhancements and stuff like that from the community is something we'll certainly be spending our time on as well. Anything else from folks for 2.1 milestone thinking? Features you want to see, like bugs, fixes, and stuff like that. Anybody? Floor is open. Yes, Christian, you first.
So so recently I was developing function HCL and adding support for extra resources. And I believe there is some work that needs to be done in the function Go SDK to make that fully possible for namespace resources. I see some commits on top of v 0.4.0, but I think those commits are necessary to have seamless extra resources for namespace extra resources. So I was wondering whether we're going to have a release for function Go SDK.
Yeah, we do need to do a function Go SDK release sometime soon. That was a follow-up after the 2.0 release to make sure that's bumped up to all the dependencies are in the updated v2 modules, et cetera, are updated. And then also compatibility for anything that needs like namespace support and stuff like that in the SDK. That is still important, and we do need to have a release out for that. So yeah, it should be coming. I don't have an exact timeline on that, but that's something that is needed for sure.
Krishnan, do you want to help me be a maintainer of Function SDK Go? I think you've used it quite a lot, right? You've built like 2 or 3 different functions on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't mind. I can take a look. Sure.
Yeah,
But I think
no
you've
pressure or
already
anything,
added. So I think you've already added the commits that I need, but it's just not been released.
Yeah, exactly. And doing a release is pretty straightforward, to be honest. So I can also just do that. But my thinking was, I had a couple of things this week where I'm like, oh man, I didn't look at that for like months or days. So probably just I'm trying to log in at the moment to GitHub because it's not just me who's maintaining it, but it is definitely all Upbound people at the moment. So, and 2 out of the it's all Upbound people, and definitely 2 of the Upbound people haven't been working on Crossplane as much lately. So having some more people who are active on Crossplane, being actively building functions, maintaining this would probably help keep it moving along. Cool.
Yeah, so here's the follow-up issue for getting a new release of the SDK for Go out. And then so Nick already added the operation functions in there. Thanks a lot for doing that, Nick. And then I remember there's a PR from Toby as well to bump some of the dependencies to 2.0 dependencies as well, and testing that and making sure things are working. So there might be a little more work left to go here before we can cut the release, but progress is happening at least. Anything else for 2.1 milestone? All right, let's keep moving forward then. Let me close other tabs. Okay. So ecosystem stuff. Awesome. So there's a bunch of functions that have been updated with like extra resources support, v2.0 support. One thing I wanted to call out is that this should affect no production scenarios whatsoever due to the nature of this provider. But provider no-op is a very popular provider for testing scenarios because it basically it just does what you tell it to, sets certain status conditions and whatnot after a given timeline that you give it, et cetera. So we use it heavily in the end-to-end tests, and lots of repos use it for unit tests, end-to-end tests, whatever. So we did a release of v0.5.0. Let's go ahead and just click on that real quick so we see the release notes. And this is important for a couple of different reasons. One, I just wanted to make sure folks understand that there was a breaking change to it. And we chose to make this breaking change because this, by its very nature, should only be used in testing scenarios and it should not be used in production. It doesn't even make any sense to use it in production. So we did a breaking change to, with adding a namespace resource, we renamed, so NOP resource that's always existed there, it's now namespace as opposed to cluster, and the cluster scope resource is called cluster, NOP resource, to follow standard conventions there. So that's a breaking change that if you're using provider NOP in your tests, you need to be aware of that. But then the other thing here is that this update here is a good example of sort of some of the work it takes to not only update a provider to support namespace resources, a non-object code generated provider, that is a standard or classic provider. It's a good example of how to do that, but also how to implement the safe start functionality so that people can install your provider, use a managed resource activation policy to say, don't start up all of the managed resources and the CRDs that come with the provider. And how your provider can do that, like the framework we have in Crossplane runtime to do that very safely and easily, so your controllers aren't crashing when types are missing, et cetera. So this is a good example to follow for that. So folks can check that out if they have a provider that they want to update to support namespace resources to support safe start and all that stuff. Cool. So Erhan, do you want to talk about some investments that are being made for providers in the ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I think this one is long awaited and has a lot of interest. So the PR is in a work in progress state, but it's basically about in object generating the Proto V6 specific schema features like nested attributes and dynamic pseudotypes. So this PR will cover that generation aspect of the provider and also the runtime stuff that is involved with it. So I think this will increase the coverage a lot. In parallel to that, I'm also kind of working on updating the object provider template to be V2 compatible. Because in order to incorporate the Proto V6 support changes, your provider needs to be V2 first. So alongside with it, there will be some kind of a migration guideline so that you can upgrade your provider to to be V2 compatible first. Then you can make the necessary changes for Proto V6 support. There are some, of course, there were some fundamental changes at Terraform side regarding handling of resources. For example, I think the most important one being the there's not a PR for it yet, Jared. It's on my local now, so I'll push it hopefully soon. The most important thing being the some Terraform resources now not necessarily have IDs, but other identifier fields. So I'll try to cover those kind of things in the guide so that you can come up with proper external name templates and functions. So yeah, that will be basically covering the generation of new providers. Other than that, there are some upcoming Crossplane V2 compatible providers. As a matter of fact, I think Provider Vault was just released when we were on this meeting. So it has a version 3.0. And the other upcoming providers with V2 support is provider OpenTofu and provider Upbound. So they will get the namespace scoped resources as well. And yeah, so I haven't noted it in here, but as I said, we are working on the general repo hygiene and documentation as well regarding V2 compatible, especially regarding V2 compatibility of providers. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it from my side.
Right on, Erhan. Thank you for sharing that. And then also thanks for your efforts on, updating, well, first, building the V2 provider support, and then, updating the existing providers and the templates and the migration guide and all that sort of stuff. So all that effort is super useful for the rest of the ecosystem to be able to, update their providers and have a more rich support across the ecosystem for namespace resources and V2 sort of patterns. So that's awesome to see. All right. There's nothing else on ecosystem, then we can go down into the community topics. John, I'll let you take this one because this is all you, my friend.
Sure. So I just cut a release of Crossplane Diff, the first release. It is a command line tool that's built off of basically the foundational parts of Crank, which is the existing Crossplane CLI. Basically, the way that it works is you feed it an XR and point it at a cluster, like by way of a kube config, and it will take that XR. It will run that XR through the render pipeline using compositions and functions that it finds in the cluster, so like what you're actually running. And it takes the results from that render pipeline and it diffs the things that come out of render against whatever live versions of those things it can find in the cluster. So that's kind of the nutshell version of it. But there's some options for making it prettier and color and not color and stuff like that. But essentially, you just feed it a pile of XRs, and it tells you what changes when you apply them to the cluster.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, John, around this time next month, you'll be willing to show it off in a live demo for us as well, so we can kind of see it in action too.
Sure, I'll give it a shot. Hopefully, most of the people here will have tried it by then.
that as well. Fair enough.
It'd be cool to. This would probably be something that'd be nice to get a small blog post for the Crossplane blog to publicize as well. And this kind of thing, I've had luck recently just using LLMs to write the blog post. So in theory, not too challenging to get the blog post done.
Yep. If you're curious about how it works, there is some design documentation in the design folder there, just about kind of how it's all put together. Yeah, I guess that's it. I think that probably the biggest maybe what I call missing feature right now is that right now it doesn't diff your compositions for you. So if you make a change to a composition, it won't tell you what comes out the other end of that composition. Right now, it only diffs XRs with existing compositions. So that's probably the next big thing that I'll add to it. Will be a different mode where you feed it the changed composition, and it does a diff against the XRs that it finds in the clusters that have a reference to that composition.
Yeah, that definitely is a scenario that would be useful for sure. Cool. Yeah. Well, John, thanks so much for your work on this. It's definitely been like a labor of love to get something pretty cool like this. So yeah, as Nick mentioned, if you want to do a blog post about it, you can work with me to get that published on the Crossplane blog and have you set up as an author and all that stuff. So feel free to we can talk about that more. But
All right.
thank you very much for your efforts, man. All righty, cool. So quick note on provider Terraform. I believe none of the APIs, none of like the publishing location of the package, etc. I don't think any of that has changed, but it is still worth noting that the source code repo is now officially in the Crossplane contrib organization. That's where to go get the source code and look at the source code of provider Terraform and contribute to it, open issues, etc. So the Upbound one has been archived, and the community, Crossplane contrib, rally around that. That's the place for all things provider Terraform. This is kind of related to what we were talking about earlier with provider no-op, but it's worth calling out here because folks on this call that are provider maintainers, this is really, really useful, I think. So we talked about safe start in your providers of if you want to be able to install a provider and have users like selectively choose which CRDs or managed resources are installed, and have your provider not crash and actually be able to support that smoothly. We wrote an entire guide for a provider author contributor standpoint of what you need to do and how you can use the primitive that we call a gate. How you can use that primitive to be able to only start your controllers if the CRDs actually exist in the API server. So a really useful guide about how you can make your provider safe start compatible as well. And it's not too challenging, really. I think that the primitive there of the gate does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It's a good abstraction, I think. So not too much to do there, and a pretty complete guide about how to test it and all that stuff too. So I wanted to call that out. So any provider authors will be able to easily update their providers to do safe start stuff. Okay. And then KubeCon Atlanta is rapidly approaching us. I think we have less than 2 months until KubeCon Atlanta is here. As always, like anybody who's fortunate enough to be in attendance, we're more than looking forward to being able to see folks and hang out in person and stuff like that. I know, that there will certainly be some people, because if we take a look at across the co-located events and across the main schedule, there's plenty of talks that are mentioning Crossplane and referencing Crossplane. So I know certainly some folks will be there, and we're excited about that. Yeah, so there's which events are these ones at? Is it? Oh, it's just color coded. It doesn't exactly say without clicking on it. But anywho, there's 5 different ones for the co-located events, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 8 or so, whatever, for the main KubeCon. So yeah, plenty of opportunities to talk about Crossplane, meet about and hang out. And I think we're probably, as usual, going to throw a little party as well. So be on the lookout for that if you want to hang out and have a good time and not just talk shop. I think we'll be kicking it at some cool place in Atlanta again, like we typically do. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah, lots of opportunities for Crossplane in Atlanta. And then thank you. I think it was Scott Rosenberg. Who I don't think is on today, but thank you for Scott Rosenberg, who is going to step up into the lightning talk as well. So I appreciate that very much. All right. So yes, it is time for a demo. Let me stop sharing my screen and pass the floor over.
Oh yeah, hi. It's yeah. Let me share my screen. Okay. I just hopefully I can. Okay, I need to rejoin the call because I just updated my Mac.
Yeah, permissions.
Yeah,
Are
permission,
you on Tahoe
yes.
now? Did
Sorry?
you update your Mac? Did you update your Mac to 26?
Yeah,
Tahoe?
26.
Is
Yes,
it super
yes.
slow? Is it bad? Like everyone's saying it's like bad and slow. Is it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Good.
I didn't feel anything about the performance drop, so should be fine.
Good for
I'm
you.
rejoined it.
Cool. We'll see you in a second. Yeah, so I think I guess some folks are having good experiences after updating to the latest major Mac version, but I've certainly heard some complaints and grumblings from other people. So I'm staying away from Tahoe right now myself. I don't want to take any risk of I'm already slow enough. I'm not taking any other risks to slow myself down.
Okay, I'm back. So let me share my screens. I just prepared a few slides to explain why I'm doing this. So there's another permissions. Anyway, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see the screen fine, so that seems to be working
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, so this is about the Crossplane provider generator. So these are like three major issues that I want to address. So for example, currently we have a provider template. So the provider that's not code generated by object. It's like you pure implement your controller and things like that to interact with the external services or the external resources. So when you look at the Crossplane provider, then usually you just click this, use this template. And after that, you need to like follow these guides, like run the script and add a provider name, or there's a bunch of different places you need to change. And I also maintain this report, and I feel like there's a lot of moving pieces, and also really difficult to if I want to change another name like provider XYZ and create another different name for the APIs, then usually need to take some time to actually get it work. So yeah, that's the first point I want to address. The second one is so when you generate a provider from these templates, then it's kind of the responsibility you need to take to update your provider to catch up the latest features from the Crossplane, right? So whenever the Crossplane releases a new feature, it's not just like update your Crossplane versions, but you also need to update your providers to use the latest Crossplane runtimes, and probably you also need to implement the features that provide by the runtime, things like that. So one of the questions come up from my mind is that after we add these features, then how we can roll out to other provider easily. And because you just use the provider from template, and there's no way to like, hey, I want to just update this small part of the code and contains like the latest features. So, and the final thing is it's really like a hassle to maintain these templates, these provider templates, due to some reasons. So that's why I kind of want to shift the problem into different directions, like how we can build a code generator for this provider templates, just like object provider. Not just like object, like can generate a bunch of the implementation, then we can use it easily. So what the tool can do, it can bootstrap your project for your provider, and yeah, init the project and then add API you want and just run it. So here's are the commands I already implemented. So the init and the create API. So yeah, I'm going to give a show demo. The tool still have some issues. So yeah, this is the command I made, and this is the init. Then you need to assign the domain for your provider. Like this is the example I gave. Templates are Crossplane.io, and the repo you can set is the repo that you want to host your providers. So it is also the name of the Go modules. But yeah, so after that, I'm going to follow by create the API and with the API group sample and kind my type and the versions. So let's run it. And it will create a bunch of different things like makefile, readme, and the git ignore, and some kind of basic stuff for your provider. And after that, you just need to make generate. And I have set up a local cluster, so I can just simply K applied CRDs. And then it also will generate the examples for you. Like a provider. These are the example for the provider config. And here is the resource. And then you can run your provider. Maybe we can get just, yeah. So as you can see now, when we get like managed, you can see there are two resources. This is because I create the example for like using different provider. The one is using cluster provider config, and the other one use namespace provider. So you can here's example sample here. Yeah, this. And after that, you can just simply run make run and check the status again. Yeah, done. So this is the demo. This is the tool I want to share. And of course, there are some issues still pending to fix. But yeah, let's back to that. I'm gonna to stop sharing my screen and back to you.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that off. I definitely like how you kind of it's taking on like streamlining the experience of getting a provider and adding considerers, like removing those manual steps from that. One thing you mentioned that I didn't expect, but it could be really, really cool, is that like long-term maintenance problem of, okay, Crossplane runtime has been updated, or providers have like a new feature that you want to incorporate, and like rolling that out, like that basically is like depends on all these provider maintainers across the ecosystem, like all individually going and like, okay, I have to understand this update, I got to make it here. So were you saying that you expect like this tool to be able to help out with that scenario too?
Yeah, so it all depends on how we structure our our controller and APIs. So as long as we are able to separate the registration for those API and controllers, and we should be able to like automatically update some part of the code within within their source code. So that's what I'm hoping that. But yeah, maybe that is the goal. And probably there's some bumping road to that goal, but yeah, there's the ultimate goal for that.
Yeah, I think that's really super cool. And I think this is a good example too of like, you know, you being a maintainer on the provider templates, and then like feeling some of the pain there of like, hey, how could we make this easier? And then, you know, taking the initiative to build something to help with that pain and streamlining it is just a great example of like, I really love seeing that, of, you know, people seeing that something could be done better and then like going and trying to make that happen. So that's awesome. And thanks for doing that.
Yeah. Just drop me the feedback, and if you've tried the tools, the current main branch, it's kind of clunky, so I will push the new release later on. It's kind of active working on that. So after that, I will make another announcement so people can start to use it, and just drop me the feedback on that. So yeah, thank you.
And then Jean, I don't know if you saw it, Jean put a comment into the chat that, you know, this is great. And it would also be nice if it could like, you know, create a owners.md file and then other type of setup work that's related to like, you know, Crossplane governance requirements for, you know, policies for community extensions and stuff like that to kind of help out with those requirements. Could be useful too.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to highlight as well is how we can integrate this into the Crossplane CLI, because right now there's the separation out from the CLI features out from the Crossplane main repository, right? So I also consider that as the kind of good integration into the CLI tools. Like, but the problem is how we can communicate between the CLI and this plugin. So the architecture I'm referencing currently is the K builder. So the project I built is basically on top of the K builder. So the K builder also have some kind of plugins that you can, hey, this is the API versions for the controller, and you can use this as a plugin to generate the implementation for that controller specifically. So I'm kind of curious about that. What we're gonna to like, what is the future that we want to see for the Crossplane CLI? Yeah.
Yeah, and were you saying that does it like import the KubeBuilder stuff as a like, you know, import as like a dependency, or does it like shell out to the KubeBuilder binary?
Shout out to the KubeBuilder binary. No, it's actually other way around. So it's what I'm seeing is the Crossplane CLI can somehow send some like a payload into this binary file, the generator I built. And the generator I built can take that the payload and generate the project. So that's the pattern I'm kind of to see this happen for the CLI.
Oh, okay. I think I see where you're going with that. Yeah, and yeah, that's a good reminder for us of like we, you know, John was bringing this up and driving on this as well too. Is like we, in order to increase the scope of functionality and features in the Crossplane that the Crossplane CLI can do, and also in order to be able to like give it its own release cadence and all that sort of stuff, there is like a really there's definitely a ton of benefits that would come from you know, moving the Crossplane CLI out of the core Crossplane source tree and into its own individual repository that can do its own releases, can have its own maintainer team, all that sort of stuff. And I think that there's a lot of support for that. And you know, folks definitely, you know, want to see that happen. And then beyond that, you know, there's another thing that can be done of, you know, supporting plugins where you can have binaries on the system, just in the similar way that like, you know, kubectl and crew does it, where a binary, willy-nilly binary can be on the system in a particular location, and then that can be basically exposed as an additional extension command to the Crossplane CLI there. So basically like a plugin model there. So those two things together there, I think would increase a lot of like this potential scope of functionality, like let the ecosystem thrive around Crossplane commands and all that sort of stuff. So I would love to see that happen soon. And today I perhaps a bit aggressively moved the issue for moving the Crossplane CLI out of tree. I moved that into the 2.1 milestone. So I think it's like kind of expressing some intent that, you know, there's this ecosystem of Crossplane CLI awesome people and functionality that we want to enable, and we haven't been able to do a good job of that yet. So, you know, being able to spend time on that sometime soon, I think would help out everybody basically.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so thanks for taking the time to share that demo. And then I know we've got a couple of other cool things in the future that folks will be showing off. And as always, like an invitation to everybody of if you're building something, you know, around the Crossplane ecosystem, Crossplane project, like feel free anytime to reach out to me if you want some time in this meeting to share it and show it to people. You're more than welcome to have a platform here, very much so. So yeah, so Nick, the next thing on the agenda then would be Nick for this issue here. Nick, do you want me to share my screen? Do you want to share your screen or?
Why don't you share your screen because you've got it in front of you, and I will find that issue once more in chatting too much.
I will click and I will go. Voila, voila.
Sorry, let me load the state up. But related to the circuit breaker thing that Jared was discussing earlier, what this issue tracks is that we have this max reconcile rate flag in core Crossplane and on all of our providers. Especially in core Crossplane, I think the providers are a harder problem, but especially in core Crossplane, I don't think this really makes sense anymore. It works by doing a couple of things, which is broken down here. So when you set this max reconcile rate flag, it's trying to tune a bunch of things in the background. one of the things it tunes is just how many workers the controller has. So like how many concurrent reconciles it could do at the same time. One of the other things it tunes is the client-side rate limiting that the Crossplane controllers use. So like they'll rate limit themselves to make sure they don't make too many requests to like get and update and all that kind of thing from the API server. And then the other thing that it does is it tunes two rate limiters. This is really hard to explain because of how Lovecraftian madness controller runtime rate limiting is, but controller runtime has its own rate limiter that does basically exponential backoff rate limiting, but it only rate limits some things. It only rate limits errors and reconciles that return and say, please reconcile immediately. It does not rate limit changes that happen due to watches. It does not rate limit changes that return, the reconciles that happen because a reconcile returns and says, hey, please run again in 30 seconds or whatever, right? So I'm going really fast here, but it's written in the issue. Long story short, doing rate limiting correct is really hard in controller runtime. So we had also written our own really hacky rate limiter implementation that basically wraps every reconciler and tries to add even more rate limiting by basically saying if something gets into the reconcile queue and we think it should be rate limited, we'll send it to the back of the reconcile queue. That hacky rate limiter really fell apart when we enabled real-time compositions and started to watch more than just the core resource that we're this is too much information to share right now. Our rate limiting is really broken, basically, in Crossplane, and controller runtime makes it almost impossible to have rate limiting that's not broken. Or like they do rate limiting really well for like a limited set of stuff, and for everything else, you just can't have a rate limiter. So that's why I pursued this path of building a circuit breaker, which I think makes a lot more sense. So with that circuit breaker in place, there starts to be a lot less reason to have our hacky rate limiter in core Crossplane. So what this issue proposes is that we remove the hacky rate limiter that's there. And I'm also proposing that we remove the client-side rate limiting that we have in Crossplane. Part of the reason I think it's safe to remove the client-side rate limiting is because for a long time now, Kubernetes has had at the server end what they call API priority and fairness. I think the A stands for API. Which basically is kind of like a QoS on the API server. Like it'll actually just tell you, it'll basically keep track of who's sending it the most traffic and how much capacity it has. And when it starts to get sort of overloaded, it'll start telling clients, hey, 429 or something like that, try again later. So for a while now, even controller runtime has not had client-side rate limiting. And the guys who run the API server are basically saying, don't worry, you don't need client-side rate limiting anymore. So this flag, like I said, that we have today that tries to sort of expose itself to the user as tuning what the max reconcile rate is, configures this hacky rate limiter that I think we should get rid of, configures client-side rate limiting that I think we should get rid of, and then configures just how many basically Go routines are reconciling stuff, right? So I think that we should trim it down to just how many Go routines exist, at which point it's not really tuning the max reconcile as the max reconcile rate anymore. It begins to just be basically how many workers there are. So my proposal here is that we basically make this only control that and rename the flag. I know a lot of people try to use this flag though, so I wanted to talk to the community beforehand to get their take on whether this would be a sort of a controversial or dramatic change. I'll finish by saying part of the reason it's called max reconcile rate and part of what it was trying to do was originally more for providers. And what it was trying to do, I don't know, I think it's more successful in providers, but maybe still a little flawed. What its goal was that, if back when we had monolithic providers like the AWS provider, the goal was you could say, hey, don't reconcile more than 500 times a second or 100 times a second, right? And that's a pretty good proxy for don't call the AWS API much more than 100 times a second. So that's what we were trying to do. That just doesn't really matter in core because core doesn't directly call any cloud APIs. So like, it's not like you're going to pay more for like the amount of API requests you're making to the Kubernetes API server or anything like that. So having kind of a max reconcile rate flag in the first place in core specifically was maybe a little bit of a flawed idea. It might have been something that we kind of just cargo culted from providers without thinking as much about as we should have. So I'll stop there. It's a ton of information. It is pretty deep in how our sort of system works with regards to rate limiting. Does anyone on this call care about this, or like from a would this be controversial to anyone, or are we good to just remove it?
I think it's good info. So the plan is to remove it, is that it? In Crossplane, but keep it
Well,
on providers?
Right now, this issue proposes that we remove it in Crossplane. There is no plan. That's why I'm asking to figure out if people feel comfortable with us having a plan. But you can see what Jared has highlighted there is right now I'm only proposing we drop it in core. There might be bugs that are affecting the providers, but I don't really want to have the discussion about providers right now. I'd rather figure out if we can do this in core and then see how that goes, and then see how we can do it in providers, if at all. The other thing that makes this tricky in providers is it was designed for the time when we had monolithic providers, right? So there's one provider that talks to AWS, and I'm saying that provider should talk to it about 100 times a second. It's not really 100 times a second because each reconcile could maybe be three calls to AWS or whatever to talk to it at a consistent rate. It's arguably flawed because now you might have 17 AWS providers and you're going to tune the flag across all of them. So there's probably a bigger rethink around how providers talk to cloud and get rate limited sort of separately from all this. But for right now, I'd rather just focus on core. I don't want to have this hacky rate limiter that's probably at this point kind of maybe hurting more than it helps, or at very least making the system sort of less predictable and messing with metrics. It messes with metrics because the way the rate limiter works is basically we see a work item come into the queue to be reconciled, and if we think it should be rate limited, we say no, go back to the back of the queue. But that makes it appear like it's coming through the queue twice. It makes it look like queue ads gets artificially inflated.
Do we have metrics? Is Crossplane emitting a counter that tells us how frequently it's, putting things back into the queue?
I believe so. I think controller runtime has metrics for all that kind of stuff, and Crossplane has all the metrics that controller runtime has for all of its work queues and whatnot. So I'm 90% sure we have that.
Yeah, might be interesting to take a look at that metric.
Why? I mean,
Well, why? Because then we can see, is it actually doing it, or is it not? And if it is actually putting things back in the queue,
oh, it's definitely
we can do an A/B comparison what the result would be if we remove this.
Yeah, I don't think we need to look at the metric to see if it's happening. It's that it is happening. That's how the code works. Like that's just kind of how it's written.
Okay.
Andrew, you had come off mute for a second. Did you have a comment you wanted to add as well?
I was just going to say, really quite honestly, what Jason has said in chat, that I support this. It sounds like it makes sense, and I agree it's complicated. But based upon the explanation that Nick gave, it sounds very plausible and like a good way to roll.
Cool. Well, this definitely wouldn't be something that we'd backport, so probably what I'd suggest is if folks feel pretty comfortable with it sooner rather than later, I'll open a pull request to remove this from core, and then it would be in the 2.1 release. So that would at least give us a while to, live with this sort of half working rate limiter turned off and make sure that nothing goes horribly wrong to the extent that we get that kind of feedback from pre-release builds.
And Nick, one thing that you could perhaps share some insight on, because I'm not very familiar with this topic, is like, so API priority and fairness stuff. How come that doesn't already help more in this scenario, like before a circuit breaker? Like how come API priority and fairness doesn't just kind of smooth things out for us and we play nicely with it and stuff like that? What's missing already?
I was going to answer your question one way, and then you said circuit breaker, and I got confused why you think this is related to the circuit breaker. Can you
because like with the circuit breaker, like we chill ourselves out. We don't go continually, doing tons and tons of reconciliations. Like we're, putting a way in for ourselves to, stop ourselves. But like, when we're not doing anything to stop ourselves effectively at all, like how come the API server doesn't, I don't know, respond with the right error codes or whatever, and the clients respect that. Like there's some key thing that's missing for API fairness and priority stuff to just work for what we're doing already.
I haven't analyzed that specifically, so I can only guess. I would say that my guesses are twofold, right? One is that a lot of what we do is just cached, like we're just reading from cache. So like all the gets, all the lists and all that kind of stuff is not actually talking to the API server. If we are in a fight with another controller, that implies that there's some kind of write going on. The compose resource is getting updated. So then for that write, there's two things that could be happening. One, API priority and fairness just doesn't work and no one's ever noticed. I doubt that's the case. Or more realistically, probably the API server is just like, I'm fine. You can make 100 requests per second. It's not stressing me out. I'm designed for that, right? So the controller's going crazy and is like, oh my God, I can't handle this. But the API server with regards to just writes is just like, yeah,
okay.
rate limit you yet? I'm not, because the point of client-side rate limiting is to not overload the API server. But the problem there is, pardon me, you've got 10 clients, they're all rate limiting themselves to, let's say, 10 requests per second. So you get 100 requests per second total. And then the API server's like, hey man, I could take 1,000, and you're all rate limiting yourself more than you need to save me, and I'm not under pressure at all. So switching the decision to the API server lets it basically say, make the call on whether it's overloaded or not.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you for that, Nick.
Had a raised his hand?
I was just going to support the thing you later said. So it's mostly I had some work with the APF, and it's the APF is basically kicks in when there is a stress in the API server. So if our current, let's say, reconcile fight still in the boundaries of the API server limits, then it's fine for the APF. It kicks in when there is other stuff. It's like an preemptive scheduling kind of thing. As that was my experience with it. I also did not do a deep dive on this, but it's, I think, closer to the second thing you said. So yeah.
Yeah, it could in theory be like, if you were on a really busy, kube cluster that had like a ton of stuff going on, lots and lots and lots of pods, many controllers, and then you had a controller fight, perhaps in that scenario, it would actually kick in and be like, well, I was already close to my limit of what I could handle, and then your controller fight pushed me over, so I'm going to rate limit you. But I don't know. Doesn't seem like we've seen that. And I would argue that the point of client-side rate limiting is to protect the API server, not to protect us from reconciling too much. So I shouldn't be looking at client-side rate limiting as a kind of a way to do that. We should use other tools like the circuit breaker to and sort of reconcile frequency rate limiting to protect that.
Cool. Sounds good to me. Thanks for spending time on educating us on that topic. So just a quick note.
Sorry, it was a bad education. It's an incredibly hard to wrap your brain around subject, and always has been, at least.
I know more than I did before the conversation, so that's a good education in my opinion. So I just want to give a note to folks that we're over time. So if anybody needs to take off, you're more than welcome to. And thank you very much for joining us today. I do personally have a little bit more time myself. So Erhan, I see you added another item here, so I'll stick around and we can entertain this one as well too.
Yeah, by the way, if you this is not a fairly urgent one, but I just wanted to kind of bring it into attention. This is about, by the way, local development. So and Crossplane build submodule. So currently V2 Crossplane V2 have introduced some stricter let's say checks on the package paths for a provider or configuration whatever. So there's now an extra cell rule that checks for whether the given register package has a fully qualified, let's say, repository and tag digest. So in the current build submodule, this is the local deploy targets are not working because of this validation. Because in the local builds, I think we are using some, let's say, I don't want to call it workaround, but it relies on a package pull policy never combined with some locally, like manually built package cache mounted into the Crossplane pod. So that's how we were doing it. So I think the package pull policy never has a special meaning in the package manager in Crossplane package manager side. So that's basically not working. So I've explained what's basically happening here, but this is basically hurting the efforts for having up test runs against V2 Crossplane. A community member had already opened up a PR for this, but I don't know whether they're here or not. But I think that needs some kind of some extra thinking. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up. So we basically need a folder structure in the package cache so that we can simulate a local package cache with the a fully qualified domain name. So that's basically what's happening. I think this will probably affect any provider developer that incorporates object into their repo and with V2. So yeah.
Hey, so Erhan, were you thinking that the solution for this can be entirely covered or taken care of in the build submodule, or did you think that any sort of like, you know, package manager like internal cache handling needs to be changed?
So I think like I had a solution for it in the Crossplane build submodule, and personally, I think it would be wiser to keep it that way. Like the Crossplane package manager code is, I think, stable enough that
Okay.
that this is only affecting the local development, by the way. That is not a runtime bug, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up in case we would like to have more attention. So it might we can take this offline in the PR, by the way. So yeah, that's why I kind of brought it up.
Yeah, that's yeah, so I agree that like I would hope that I would not want to like change how the internally how the package manager deals with this cache and stuff like that. I would like for the build some module to, you know, put the right prefixes or postfixes or whatever in place that's needed, or potentially like if there are scenarios where it makes sense to relax the strict validation that we do, then that is potentially another way to approach this. But yeah, I think my preference would be let the build submodule, you know, do the right things with creating and naming packages so it all works appropriately. So then, Erhan, if you have feedback on this PR, like do feel free to drop those as comments, like review the PR, put your comments in, like, you know, any suggestions that you have, because you've clearly thought about this a little bit more. So feel free to please put that publicly on the PR here too.
All right.
Sweet. All right. Awesome. Thanks for bringing that up, Erhan. All right,
Yeah.
that's everything on the agenda here. Thanks for folks who stayed over in time. Thanks for everybody showing up. Good to see everybody. And then we'll meet next month. And I think that'll be the last time we meet before KubeCon Atlanta. So we'll see you guys soon. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.